Husband neglected my first Mother's Day, prioritized his mom's mulch, so we ignored his Father's Day celebration without apology. Our little boy is about to turn 1 late this summer, so this year marked the very first Mother's Day and Father's Day for both me and my husband. When my husband asked what I wanted for Mother's Day, I told him I didn't need anything big or expensive. What I truly wanted was simple: a family day at the zoo. Between our son's morning and afternoon naps, we get about 4 hours of sweet awake time. Since the zoo is about a 30-minute drive, I figured if we left right after his first nap and breakfast, we'd have a couple of hours to explore, and our little guy could nap in the car on the way home if needed. The previous weekend, we'd already taken my mom and my mother-in-law out for brunch, his mom on Saturday and mine on Sunday, to celebrate their first Mother's Day as grandmothers. I got them each thoughtful gifts and flowers, really tried to make it special. I handled all the arrangements and let both moms know, along with my husband, my dad, and my father-in-law, that on the actual Mother's Day, we'd be spending it as our own little family. My mother-in-law is notoriously pushy and overbearing, so I made sure there was zero room for confusion or last-minute snags. But, of course, the night before Mother's Day weekend, my father-in-law texted my husband with a picture of the mountain of mulch he just had delivered, apparently, all 300 bags of it for their enormous yard. Then, that night, my mill called my husband asking him to come over first thing in the morning to help move the mulch. She insisted it wouldn't interfere with our zoo plans, just a couple of hours, she said, since we weren't leaving for the zoo until after our son's nap. She guilted him by saying Phil might hurt himself if he had to move it all alone. I was immediately annoyed. She was clearly angling to get us to skip our family plans. I told my husband as much, but he brushed it off, repeating over and over that it wouldn't take long and his mom promised he'd be back quickly. I think most people can guess how things actually went. He went over there first thing, which meant no breakfast in bed, and I got up to feed the little guy alone. I spent some quality time with my son, played with him, and when he went down for his morning nap, I texted my husband to remind him it was time to start wrapping things up. 2 hours later, when our son woke up, I called again, reminded him I'd be ready as soon as I finished feeding our boy. But my husband just kept telling me it was taking longer than he expected, he'd hurry up. An hour and a half passed. By the time he finally called saying he was on his way home, never mind the 15 to 20-minute drive, we'd completely missed our window for going to the zoo. I was furious and told him not to bother coming home right away, just stay and finish the mulch, and not to worry about Mother's Day since he hadn't managed to do a single thing I'd asked. Later, his mom called me, trying for a come hang out with us since you're not going to the zoo. I couldn't hide how upset I was and told her bluntly I had no interest in spending time with the people who ruined my first Mother's Day. Instead, I stayed home, ordered pizza, and binged Netflix, alone. When my husband finally got home, he was full of apologies and wanted to know how he could make it up to me. I told him he could make it up by not ruining my first Mother's Day. I also let him know he should plan on spending Father's Day with his parents, because me and our little guy would be celebrating Father's Day with my parents. Since then, my mill hasn't stopped texting and calling, but I've been keeping my responses short and bland. My husband keeps apologizing and asking how to make it right, but honestly, I don't even want to bother now. I keep thinking how it was my first ever Mother's Day, and all I wanted was a calm, inexpensive outing that celebrated our little family. The real problem is his utter inability to set boundaries with his mother, while she's completely incapable of considering anyone's feelings but her own. This past Saturday, my husband asked if I was still planning to go to my parents' house for Father's Day and said he'd like to come, too. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but since I hadn't done anything for his dad, he might want to go see him instead. In the end, we both went to my parents'. My dad grilled, as only he can, and the weather was perfect. We ate on the deck, played with our son, and enjoyed a genuinely lovely day. I'm not sure what, if anything, my husband did for his own dad. I know he kept getting texts, which I assume were from his mom. At one point, she sent me a snippy message about how it was hurtful I'd spent the day with my family instead of my husband's. I simply replied she got to spend Mother's Day with her baby boy, so it was only fair I spend Father's Day with my family for a change. I know my husband was hurt we didn't expressly acknowledge him for Father's Day, but on the drive to my parents' house, I told him very plainly, I'm just matching his energy. I haven't made any effort to de-escalate the drama because I'm still just so deeply hurt he continues to prioritize his mom over me and our son. This isn't even the first time his mother has done something like this. I'm just exhausted by the constant overstepping and insistence that everything be her way. I've gotten better at keeping her at arm's length and holding my own boundaries, but my husband seems totally incapable of doing the same. I don't know where things go from here, but at least for now, I'm putting our little family first, even if I have to do it all on my own. Update 1. This weekend, my husband and I finally sat down and really talked about everything. I let him know just how deeply upset and disappointed I was after how both Mother's Day and Father's Day turned out. I told him how much I genuinely wanted to recognize and celebrate him for Father's Day, just as much as I had hoped he would do for me on Mother's Day. He admitted he knew he shouldn't have gone to his parents' house on Mother's Day, but said he felt cornered because his mother was putting so much pressure on him. She'd told him that if his dad got hurt, it would be his fault, and she wouldn't let up. He looked so defeated sitting there, finally confessing that he knew he'd messed up, and that he's been terrified I was about to ask for a divorce. Since he cut straight to the heart of it, I told him the truth. If this is what our marriage would look like for the rest of our lives, then I didn't want to stay married to him. I explained to him that, yes, I was upset about Mother's Day, but that wasn't the only reason. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. His mother's behavior, this overbearing, intrusive pattern, has been going on since before we even got engaged, and it's only gotten worse over the years. As I was preparing for this conversation, I listed every single time an event I could remember where she had overstepped or outright ruined things for us. For our honeymoon, she called him twice a day. Every morning, she'd call to ask what we were doing, and every evening, she'd want a full debrief, plus constant texts, non-stop requests for photos, and reminders of how much she missed him. Looking back, I can't even understand how I thought that was normal or acceptable. She tried to make our wedding about herself, as if we were side characters in her story. When I was pregnant, she tried to make it about herself again, and when we brought our son home, she wanted to take over, totally ignoring boundaries, always inserting herself where she didn't belong. I told him I don't really want a divorce, not right now. But if it's going to happen anyway, I'd rather it happens now, while we can still keep things amicable. Because if nothing changes, I'll only become more angry and resentful, and I don't want that bitterness to explode and make the divorce ugly for our son's sake. At that point, we both broke down, crying, absolutely emotional. I said I'd give him some time to decide how he wanted to handle things, but if I didn't see real, clear effort from him to prioritize me and our son, I'd have to move forward with divorce. And the changes would have to stick. Every time we've fought about this, he promised he'd change, and sometimes he has, but then his mother pulls him right back into her orbit. If we're going to stay married, there are things I'm absolutely insisting on now. I see the fear and stress on his face at the idea of putting hard boundaries in place or distancing from his parents, and I do feel for him. He says he feels trapped, caught between a rock and a hard place, like both his mother and I put enormous pressure on him and expect different things from him. And I understand how hard that must be. But he needs to understand that I'm not tolerating this dynamic anymore. I know this will set off a storm with his parents, but if we don't do it now, it'll only get worse down the road. I'm determined, it's time to draw the line. Update 2. There are a couple of things I want to address up front. So many people tell me that I knew exactly what I was signing up for when I married my husband. They say this entire saga is on me and that if I truly didn't want a mama's boy, I should have walked away before it ever got this far. And honestly, they're not wrong. I ignored every red flag there was, reassuring myself that things would change and get better, once we were engaged, once we were married, once we got pregnant, once we had kids. I fed myself that fairy tale over and over. But what's really happened is that things have just gotten worse as time passed. It's like that story about the frog in a pot of boiling water, where you don't realize how hot it's getting until it's too late to hop out. I know I set myself up for this, but now that we're here, we have to figure out how to move forward. I've also heard that my list of rules is somehow on par with his mother's behavior or maybe even worse, and that drawing such lines makes me just as controlling. Maybe they're right, but I truly don't believe my boundaries are outrageous. I don't expect his parents to give us anything I don't expect from myself and my own family. Everything comes down to simple respect and consideration. It's not like I'm telling him never to see his parents or that they're not allowed to visit. But I do believe neither set of parents should always come first and get to bulldoze over our lives and decisions as a family. Let's start with some good news. Trying to make up for a less than great Mother's Day, my husband surprised me with a weekend trip for the three of us to San Antonio. Before we had our little one, we went all the time and loved staying on the Riverwalk, just enjoying being tourists together. He planned this on his own, which, for me, really mattered. Sure, it was a completely different kind of trip, felt more like a military operation with all the gear that comes with traveling with a baby, and it definitely wasn't romantic, with a pack and play wedged up next to the bed. My husband was obviously stressed and kept apologizing. But I reminded him that the important thing was that he tried and stepped up to do something thoughtful for us. I genuinely enjoyed it, and I made sure he knew that. The best part? He actually ignored his mom's calls and didn't spend half the trip texting her. I overheard the fallout when we got home, her tearing into him for not telling them we were away, not inviting them, and not answering when she called. He took that heat, and I know it wasn't easy on him. I'm planning something special for him as a belated Father's Day to try to rewrite those first Mother's and Father's Day memories with something better, even if it's after the fact. Another bright spot, therapy. Both of us started weekly individual sessions, and we're also seeing a couples therapist every week. I'm about to return to work full-time, so our little one has started daycare part-time to get him used to the routine. The first day, honestly, was more traumatic for me than him, but he's adjusting and happy when I go to pick him up after lunch. This is a huge sticking point with my Mill. She insists on babysitting, but I just won't allow it because she flat out refuses to respect any of our boundaries or rules. I've been firm, following through with every single one of my boundaries. I'm not completely no contact, but I have absolutely dropped the rope at this point. Of course, there's always a flip side. For our son's first birthday, I planned a small, casual gathering, just our parents, a couple close friends, nothing huge, maybe 10 to 15 people, including us. I wanted to make a little smash cake for our son and adult snacks for everyone else. I planned simple decorations, because honestly, he won't remember any of it. But my Mill hated every bit of it. She demanded it be at her house, that all her friends and relatives get invited, that there be a grocery store cake smeared in super sweet icing, loud decorations, the works. I flat out refused. I told her, no. Absolutely not. Our kid, our house, our plans. She immediately went to my husband to try to get him to override me, and he tried to talk me into letting her have her way. This is the pattern: she oversteps, I push back, he puts down a boundary, then just as quickly, he forgets about the boundary. Through therapy, we've started talking about how this dynamic has developed. At one point, our counselor paused us while we discussed the birthday plans and asked my husband, "What do you want?" Not what I wanted, not what his mother wanted, him. He genuinely froze, like a deer in headlights. I realized probably no one's ever asked him what he really wants. The outcome? If he doesn't actually have an opinion, he needs to defer to me, his wife, not just let his mother's wishes take over because it's easier or to keep her calm. If he actually wanted to do it her way, then he should say that, but because he truly wants it, not simply to avoid upsetting her. Likewise, if he wants something entirely different, he needs to feel safe to say so. But his mom's opinion can't always be the deciding vote. It's fine if he agrees with her, but it has to be an active choice. It was a good reminder for me too, to make space for his input. So rather than telling him, "Here's what I want for our son's birthday, do you agree?" I need to say, "I have some ideas, but I really want to know what you think before we decide together." We did end up hosting the party my way, because my husband took our therapist's advice and, since he didn't have a preference, deferred to me. Mill sulked the whole time and even brought a giant sheet cake after I told her multiple times not to. We didn't serve it during the party, just as I said we wouldn't, which ticked her off. Later, my husband and I ended up snacking on it after we put the little one to bed, and honestly, between the two of us, I was glad I stuck to my boundaries because that icing was absolutely sickening. Putting some distance between myself and my Mill has made a world of difference. I'm not constantly on edge or worrying about every move, and I'm not tiptoeing around her feelings anymore. I still don't know if this means our marriage will make it, but what I do know is that my husband has spent his whole life deferring, especially to his mother, and now, I can see how hard it is for him to learn to stand up for himself and for us. Only time will tell if we can find a new equilibrium, but I'm determined to keep fighting for what our little family needs, even if it means things stay this messy for a while. I've come to realize that my husband has been catering to other people, especially his mom and, to an extent, me, for so long that he's almost lost the ability to form his own thoughts and opinions. The love I feel for him is still strong, though the blazing anger that first surged through me has quieted, leaving me instead with a deep sadness for him. Maybe it's because I'm starting to see him more clearly. I see how deeply ingrained these patterns are, and I'm beginning to understand him on a level I didn't before. But with that understanding comes doubt. Can he actually change? Can anyone, after so many years of living this way? Meanwhile, I know exactly what's happening on his mother's end. She's complaining to him, venting her frustration that I haven't been dutifully bending to her will, that I haven't been making the solo visits or dropping everything to accommodate her when they show up, unannounced. Still, I haven't found it in myself to push him to create his own boundaries with her, not yet. There's a part of me that wonders what would happen if he did, and another part that wants to protect him from that fallout. So, even as I wrestle with these questions and wait to see if change is possible, I remain in this strange limbo, caught between my urge to stand up for myself and my growing empathy for a man who is so lost in other people's expectations, he can hardly remember who he's supposed to be. Update 3. Things have been complicated. I wasn't planning to update so soon, but something happened this weekend that I can't stop thinking about, and honestly, I need to get it out somewhere. My husband has been making genuine progress in therapy. He's started speaking up more at home, actually voicing his own preferences instead of just going along with whatever. Last week, when his mom called wanting us to come over for Sunday dinner because she hadn't seen us in forever, it had been 2 weeks, he actually said no without looking to me first. I was proud of him, even though I could see how much it cost him. He was visibly shaking after he hung up. But here's where it gets messy. That same day, I was at the grocery store with our son when I ran into Jake, my college boyfriend. We dated for 3 years, broke up amicably when he moved across the country for work, and I hadn't seen him since. Turns out he moved back to town 6 months ago for a new job. It was innocent enough, just catching up while our son babbled happily in his stroller. Jake mentioned he was divorced now, no kids, and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my life. When our son started getting fussy, Jake offered to help carry my groceries to the car. As we're loading everything, he said he'd love to catch up properly sometime, maybe grab coffee. I should have said no. I know that. But in that moment, talking to someone who knew me before I became a wife and mother, before all this drama with my in-laws, it felt like breathing fresh air. So I said yes. We met for coffee Tuesday morning after I dropped our son at daycare. What was supposed to be an hour turned into 3. Jake listened, really listened, as I found myself venting about everything. The Mother's Day disaster, the constant boundary issues, how exhausted I am from always being the bad guy who has to enforce limits with my Mill. He didn't offer solutions or tell me what I should do. He just listened and validated that what I was going through sounded incredibly difficult. When he walked me to my car, there was this moment. This pause where we just looked at each other. And I realized how long it had been since I felt seen and heard like that. Jake leaned in, and for a split second, I thought about letting him kiss me. Instead, I stepped back and said I should go, but I've been thinking about him constantly since then. About how easy it was to talk to him, how he made me feel like myself again instead of just someone's wife or someone's daughter-in-law or someone's mother. I keep telling myself it was just nice to have adult conversation with someone who isn't invested in all my family drama, but I know it's more than that. The worst part? My husband has been trying so hard lately. Yesterday, when his mom called during dinner demanding to know why we weren't coming to his cousin's baby shower, that she'd never mentioned before, he actually told her we already had plans and couldn't make last-minute commitments. Then he turned off his phone for the rest of the evening so we could have uninterrupted family time. I should be thrilled. This is exactly what I've been begging him to do for months, but instead, I found myself distracted, thinking about my coffee date with Jake and wondering what it would be like to be with someone who doesn't come with all this baggage. Jake texted me this morning asking if I wanted to meet up again. I haven't responded yet, but I haven't deleted the message either. I keep staring at my phone, knowing I should just block his number and pretend this never happened. My therapist always talks about how we can't control our feelings, only our actions. I can't help that seeing Jake stirred up all these emotions and made me question everything about my marriage. But I can control what I do next. The rational part of me knows this is dangerous territory. My husband is finally making changes, we're in therapy, we have a baby together. This is exactly the wrong time to be entertaining thoughts about someone else. But the other part of me, the part that felt so alive during those 3 hours at the coffee shop, keeps wondering what if. I haven't told my therapist about Jake yet. I'm supposed to see her tomorrow, and I know she'll ask the hard questions I'm not ready to answer. Like whether I'm sabotaging my marriage just when it might actually have a chance to work. Or whether my attraction to Jake is really about him, or just about escaping all the complications of my real life. What I do know is that I can't keep living in this limbo forever. Something has to give, one way or another. Update 4. I deleted Jake's text without responding. For about a week, I felt proud of myself for doing the right thing. My husband continued making progress. He even told his mom we wouldn't be available for their impromptu Thanksgiving planning meeting because we'd already decided to spend it with my family this year. The old me would have been over the moon about this. But then Jake showed up at our son's daycare. I was running late picking up our boy when I saw a familiar figure by the parking lot. My heart literally stopped. Jake was leaning against his car, and the moment he saw me, he walked over with that same easy smile that used to make my knees weak in college. "I was worried when you didn't respond," he said, his voice gentle but insistent. I thought maybe I'd said something wrong. I glanced around, paranoid that somehow my husband or his mother would materialize out of thin air. "Jake, you can't just show up here. This is where my son goes to daycare." "I know," I asked around. The casualness of his admission sent a chill down my spine. "Look, I can't stop thinking about our conversation. About you. I know the timing is complicated, but the timing isn't just complicated, it's impossible." I cut him off, but my voice came out weaker than I intended. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same one he wore in college. "Is it though? You told me yourself how unhappy you are, how your husband's family treats you like an outsider, how you feel like you're fighting this battle alone." The worst part was that he was right. Despite my husband's recent improvements, I still felt exhausted. Like I was constantly braced for the next boundary to be crossed, the next fight with my mill, the next test of whether my husband would actually stand up for us. "I should go," I whispered, but I didn't move. "One dinner," Jake said. "Just two old friends catching up. If nothing else, you deserve one evening where you don't have to think about any of this drama." I knew I should have said no. Instead, I heard myself asking, "When?" We made plans for Friday night. I told my husband I was having dinner with an old college friend who was in town, which was technically true. He didn't ask any follow-up questions, just offered to handle bedtime so I could enjoy myself. The guilt was eating me alive, but I went anyway. The restaurant Jake chose was intimate, soft lighting, quiet corners, the kind of place couples go for romantic dinners. We ordered wine, and conversation flowed just like it had at the coffee shop. For 3 hours, I forgot about mother-in-law drama and boundary setting and couples therapy. I was just me again. As we were leaving, Jake caught my hand. "I've missed this," he said. "Missed us." "Jake." I started, but he was already leaning in. This time, I didn't step back. The kiss was soft, familiar, and everything I'd been missing. For a moment, I let myself sink into it, let myself remember what it felt like to be wanted without conditions or complications. Then I pulled away, shaking. "This can't happen," I said, but even as I said it, I knew it already had. "It already is happening," Jake replied, reading my mind. "The question is what we do about it." I drove home in a daze. My husband was on the couch, reading. When I walked in, he looked up with a smile that made my stomach twist with guilt. "How was dinner? Did you have fun catching up?" "It was nice," I managed, the lie burning my throat. "Good. You needed a night out." He closed his book and reached for my hand. "I'm proud of you for taking some time for yourself." I know I haven't always made that easy. I wanted to cry. Here he was, being thoughtful and supportive, and I had just kissed another man. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while my husband slept beside me. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Thank you for tonight. I know this is complicated, but I meant what I said. I've never stopped caring about you." I stared at the message for a long time before finally turning my phone face down without responding. But I didn't delete it either. The next morning at breakfast, my husband mentioned that his mom had called while I was out. She wants to host Christmas at their house this year. Big family gathering, all the cousins, the whole thing. My chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her we'd talk about it." He paused, studying my face. "I know you're probably not thrilled about the idea, but maybe we could compromise? Christmas Eve with them, Christmas morning just us?" 6 months ago, I would have appreciated this attempt at compromise. Now, sitting here with Jake's text still glowing on my phone and the taste of another man's kiss still on my lips, all I could think was, is this what the rest of my life looks like? Negotiating with my mill through my husband forever? "Sure," I said flatly. "Whatever you think is best." My husband frowned. "Are you okay? You seem distant this morning." Distant. If only he knew. "I'm just tired," I lied. Again. But the truth is, I'm not just tired. I'm standing at a crossroads, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I'm not sure which path I'm going to choose. My phone is sitting right next to me as I type this. Jake's message is still there, waiting for a response. Part of me knows I should confess everything to my therapist, maybe even to my husband. Come clean and deal with the consequences. But another part of me, the part that felt alive for the first time in months during that kiss, keeps thinking about what Jake said. The question is what we do about it. Update 5. I wish I could say I made the right choice, but I didn't. Jake and I have been seeing each other for 3 weeks now. It started with stolen coffee dates during my lunch breaks, then progressed to longer meetings while our son was at daycare. Each time I told myself it would be the last time, and each time I found myself saying yes when he asked to see me again. My husband has no idea. He's actually been incredible lately. Last weekend he told his mother we couldn't come to Sunday dinner because we had plans. We didn't, we just wanted a quiet family day, and when she showed up unannounced anyway, he actually didn't let her in. He told her through the door that we'd already discussed this and she needed to call before coming over. I watched from the window as she stood on our porch for 10 minutes, clearly expecting him to cave. When he didn't, she finally left. The old me would have been doing cartwheels. Instead, I felt nothing but guilt as I watched my husband take this massive step forward while I was actively betraying him. Yesterday, everything came to a head. Jake had been pushing for us to spend more time together, saying he'd gotten a hotel room for the afternoon. Just to talk without looking over our shoulders, he said, but we both knew what he was really suggesting. I told him no, that I couldn't cross that line, but he kept pressing. "You're not happy," he said during our coffee date Tuesday. "I can see it in your eyes, even when you're telling me about his progress. You're settling for scraps of what you deserve." He wasn't entirely wrong. Even with my husband's improvements, I still felt like we were constantly one phone call away from the next crisis with his family. Like I was always braced for impact. "Come to the hotel Friday," Jake said. "If nothing else, we can just talk somewhere private. No pressure." I almost said yes. I had my mouth open to agree when my phone rang. The daycare. Our son had spiked a fever and needed to be picked up immediately. The drive to get him gave me clarity I'd been avoiding for weeks. Here I was, contemplating having an affair, while my husband was at work trying to provide for our family. While my baby was sick and needed his mom. When I got to the daycare, our son was flushed and clingy. The teacher said he'd been asking for mama all morning. As I held his warm little body against my chest, something inside me just broke. I texted Jake, "I can't do this anymore. Please don't contact me again." His response came immediately, "You're making a mistake. He'll never change, not really. You'll be dealing with his mother forever." I blocked his number. But Jake was more persistent than I'd anticipated. This morning, while I was getting our son ready for daycare, his fever broke overnight. Thank God, there was a knock at the door. My husband had already left for work, so I assumed it was a delivery. It was Jake. "We need to talk," he said, looking agitated. "You can't just cut me off like that. Jake, you need to leave. My husband isn't here." I waited until I saw him leave. The casual way he said this sent ice through my veins. He'd been watching our house. "You're scaring me," I said, trying to close the door, but he put his hand against it. "I'm not trying to scare you, I'm trying to save you from wasting your life." His voice was pleading now. "I know you feel something for me. I know you're not happy." Our son started crying from his high chair in the kitchen. He could probably sense my distress. I used that as an excuse to step back. "I have to go to him," I said. "I'll wait." "No, you won't. You'll leave, and you won't come back." For a moment, Jake just stared at me. Then his expression shifted to something I didn't recognize. "You know what? Fine, go back to your miserable little life. But when you're 50 and still fighting the same battles with his mother, don't say I didn't try to give you a way out." He left, but not before adding, "I hope he's worth it." I spent the rest of the morning shaking. When my husband called to check on our son, I almost told him everything right then. But I couldn't find the words. Tonight, after we put the baby to bed, my husband and I were cleaning up the kitchen when he said, "You've seemed stressed lately. Is everything okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He was loading the dishwasher, something he never used to do without being asked. He'd been trying so hard, making real changes, putting us first in ways I'd begged him to do for years. "I need to tell you something," I heard myself say. He stopped what he was doing and turned to face me. "Okay." And then I lost my nerve. "I've just been worried about going back to work full-time next month. Leaving him at daycare longer." It wasn't entirely a lie, that has been weighing on me. But it wasn't the truth either. My husband walked over and pulled me into a hug. "We'll figure it out together," he said. "I promise." As I stood there in his arms, I realized Jake was wrong about one thing. My husband has changed. Maybe not completely, maybe not perfectly, but genuinely. The question now is whether I've damaged things too badly to move forward. I see my therapist tomorrow. I think it's time to tell her everything and figure out if this marriage is salvageable, and whether I deserve the chance to try.